Sarah Martinez stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the simple black dress she had chosen for her son's graduation ceremony. At 52, she maintained the same disciplined posture that had served her well during her years in the military, though few people in her quiet suburban neighborhood knew about that chapter of her life. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore minimal makeup, preferring the natural look that had become her signature since retiring from active duty 15 years ago. The morning sun streamed through the window of her modest two-bedroom home in San Diego, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors she had installed herself. Sarah had always been handy with tools, another skill she had picked up during her military service that surprised her civilian neighbors when they discovered it. She glanced at the clock on her nightstand and realized she needed to leave soon if she wanted to arrive at the Naval Academy in Annapolis on time. Today was special. Her son David was graduating from the United States Naval Academy, fulfilling a dream he had held since he was 12 years old. Sarah remembered the day he had announced his intention to apply to the academy, his eyes bright with determination as he explained his desire to serve his country. She had supported him completely, though she had kept her own military background largely to herself, even with David. The drive to BWI Airport would take about 20 minutes, and her flight to Baltimore was scheduled to depart at noon. Sarah had packed light, bringing only a small carry-on bag for the two-day trip. She preferred to travel efficiently, a habit ingrained during years of military deployments when every ounce of gear mattered. Her bag contained the essentials, a change of clothes, toiletries, her phone charger, and a small wrapped gift for David that she planned to give him after the ceremony. As she grabbed her keys from the kitchen counter, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in the hallway mirror. The black dress she wore was conservative and appropriate for the formal ceremony, with three-quarter sleeves that covered most of her arms. She had chosen it specifically for this reason, knowing that the elaborate tattoo on her right shoulder and upper arm might draw unwanted attention and questions she preferred not to answer. The tattoo was a work of art, created by a master tattoo artist in Virginia Beach over the course of several sessions 15 years ago. It depicted the Navy SEAL trident, also known as the Budweiser, surrounded by intricate nautical designs that told the story of her 20-year career in naval special warfare. The trident itself was rendered in stunning detail, with the eagle's wings spread wide and the anchor and pistol clearly defined. Surrounding it were waves, compass roses, and the dates of significant missions that had shaped her career. Few people had ever seen the tattoo in its entirety. Sarah was not one to seek attention or recognition for her service, preferring to blend into civilian life and focus on raising David as a single mother. She had never remarried after her husband's death in a training accident when David was only 5 years old, choosing instead to dedicate herself to providing her son with a stable, loving home while pursuing a quiet career as a high school mathematics teacher. The neighborhood where Sarah lived was typical of suburban San Diego, with well-maintained lawns and family-friendly streets where children rode their bikes and neighbors greeted each other with friendly waves. Her immediate neighbors knew her as the polite, reserved teacher who lived alone and kept her yard immaculate. They knew she had served in the Navy because she had mentioned it in passing, but most assumed she had worked in an administrative capacity, perhaps as a clerk or communication specialist. Mrs. Henderson, who lived next door, often commented on how impressed she was that Sarah managed to maintain her home so well without a husband to help. She had no idea that Sarah could field strip an assault rifle in under 30 seconds, navigate by the stars, or swim 2 miles in rough ocean conditions while carrying full combat gear. These were skills that Sarah rarely had occasion to use in her civilian life, though she maintained her physical fitness with a rigorous daily workout routine that began at 5 o'clock every morning. The drive to the airport gave Sarah time to reflect on the journey that had brought her to this day. David had been an excellent student throughout high school, maintaining the high academic standards required for admission to the Naval Academy, while also participating in cross-country running and debate team. Sarah had attended every meet and competition, cheering from the sidelines like any other parent, though she often found herself unconsciously analyzing the tactical aspects of the running courses or the strategic elements of debate arguments. During David's senior year of high school, when he was preparing his application to the Naval Academy, he had asked Sarah about her own military service. She had answered his questions honestly, but had kept the details deliberately vague, explaining that she had served as a specialist in naval operations without elaborating on the specific nature of her duties. David had accepted this explanation without pressing for more information, assuming that his mother's role had been support-related rather than operational. The truth was far more complex. Sarah had been one of only a handful of women to successfully complete Navy SEAL training during the experimental program that had briefly allowed female candidates in the late 1990s. The program had been discontinued after political pressure and bureaucratic complications, but not before Sarah and two other women had earned their tridents and served with distinction in several classified operations. Sarah's career in naval special warfare had been marked by numerous commendations and awards, though most of her missions remained classified even 15 years after her retirement. She had operated in environments that most people could not imagine, facing dangers that would give civilians nightmares. Yet she had also experienced the profound satisfaction that came from serving alongside some of the most dedicated and skilled warriors in the world, men and women who had become her closest friends and most trusted colleagues. The decision to retire from active duty had been difficult, but necessary. After her husband's death, Sarah had realized that David needed at least one parent who could be present and available throughout his childhood and adolescence. The demanding schedule of a Navy SEAL, with its frequent deployments and training exercises, was not compatible with being the kind of mother she wanted to be for her son. She had submitted her retirement papers on David's 6th birthday, exactly 1 year after losing her husband. The ceremony had been small and private, attended only by her commanding officer and a few close friends from her unit. They had understood her decision, even as they expressed regret at losing such a capable and experienced operator. Sarah had received a flag that had been flown over the SEAL compound in Coronado, along with a commendation letter that praised her exceptional service and unwavering dedication to the principles of naval special warfare. The transition to civilian life had been challenging in ways that Sarah had not anticipated. After years of operating in high-stress environments where split-second decisions could mean the difference between life and death, the pace of suburban life felt almost surreal. She had enrolled in a master's degree program in education, using her GI Bill benefits to prepare for a career that would allow her to have a stable schedule and be present for David's important moments. Teaching high school mathematics turned out to be more demanding than Sarah had expected, though in different ways than her military career. Dealing with teenagers required patience and diplomatic skills that complemented her tactical training in unexpected ways. She found that her ability to remain calm under pressure and think strategically served her well in managing classroom dynamics and helping struggling students overcome academic challenges. Over the years, Sarah had developed a reputation at Jefferson High School as a teacher who could reach even the most difficult students. Her colleagues attributed this to her natural authority and obvious competence, not realizing that her ability to command respect came from years of leading elite military personnel in life and death situations. Students responded to her calm confidence and clear expectations, sensing that she was someone who had experienced real challenges and overcome them. Sarah's principal, Dr. Rebecca Johnson, had often tried to convince her to take on additional leadership roles within the school district, recognizing her natural leadership abilities and problem-solving skills. Sarah had consistently declined these opportunities, preferring to focus on her classroom teaching and maintaining the low profile that allowed her to be available for David's activities and needs. The only person at school who suspected that Sarah's military background was more extensive than she had revealed was Tom Wilson, a fellow teacher who had served as a Marine infantry officer in Iraq and Afghanistan. Tom recognized something in Sarah's bearing and the way she moved that suggested combat experience, but he had never pressed her for details, understanding the value of privacy when it came to military service. As Sarah pulled into the airport parking garage, she felt the familiar pre-mission focus that had served her well during her operational years. Today's mission was simple: attend David's graduation ceremony, celebrate his achievement, and return home without drawing unwanted attention to herself or her background. She had no intention of stealing any spotlight from David's moment of triumph. The airport was crowded with travelers heading to various destinations for weekend activities and family events. Sarah moved through the security checkpoint with the efficient movements of someone accustomed to navigating complex logistical challenges. She had arrived with plenty of time to spare, another habit from her military days when punctuality was not just preferred but essential for mission success. While waiting for her flight to board, Sarah sat in the departure lounge and watched other passengers prepare for their journeys. She noticed a group of what appeared to be retired military personnel, easily identifiable by their bearing, haircuts, and the way they moved with unconscious precision. One of them, a man in his 60s wearing a Navy veteran baseball cap, caught her eye and nodded respectfully. Sarah nodded back, recognizing the unspoken acknowledgement that passed between veterans. The flight to Baltimore was smooth and uneventful. Sarah spent most of the journey reading a novel she had brought, though her mind kept drifting to thoughts of David and how proud she was of his accomplishment. The Naval Academy was one of the most prestigious military institutions in the world, and admission was highly competitive. David had earned his place through academic excellence, physical fitness, and demonstrated leadership potential. Upon landing at BWI Airport, Sarah collected her bag and made her way to the rental car counter. She had reserved a compact car for the drive to Annapolis, preferring to have her own transportation rather than dealing with taxis or rideshare services. The independence and mobility appealed to her tactical mindset, even though the graduation ceremony presented no actual security concerns. The drive from Baltimore to Annapolis took about 45 minutes through Maryland countryside that was beautiful in the late spring weather. Sarah had visited the Naval Academy once before, during David's freshman year when parents were invited for a special weekend event. She had been impressed by the historic campus and the obvious pride that the midshipmen took in their institution and their future service to the country. The morning of David's graduation dawned bright and clear, with the kind of perfect weather that seemed to bless important occasions. Sarah woke at 5:30, her internal clock still operating on the military schedule that had governed her life for so many years. She performed her usual morning routine of push-ups, sit-ups, and stretching exercises in the small hotel room, maintaining the physical conditioning that remained second nature to her even in civilian life. After a light breakfast in the hotel restaurant, Sarah returned to her room to prepare for the ceremony. She showered and carefully applied minimal makeup, choosing a look that was polished but understated. Her goal was to blend in with the other parents while still looking appropriate for such a significant occasion. The black dress fit perfectly, its conservative design providing the coverage she needed to keep her tattoo concealed while still looking elegant and respectful. As she drove toward the Naval Academy campus, Sarah could feel the excitement building throughout the Annapolis area. Families were converging on the academy from all directions, many wearing Navy-themed clothing or carrying flowers for their graduating midshipmen. The atmosphere was festive and celebratory, with an underlying current of pride and patriotism that was palpable in the early morning air. The parking situation at the academy was carefully organized, with military precision evident in the way traffic was directed and vehicles were arranged. Sarah followed the signs to the designated parking area for families, noting the efficient system that had been established to handle the thousands of visitors attending the ceremony. She appreciated the logistical planning that went into such a large-scale event, recognizing the careful coordination required to ensure everything ran smoothly. After parking her rental car, Sarah joined the stream of families walking toward the main campus area where the graduation ceremony would take place. She carried a small bouquet of flowers for David, along with her purse, and the wrapped gift she planned to give him later. The flowers were simple white roses, chosen because they were David's favorite and because they would photograph well without being overly flashy or attention-grabbing. The Naval Academy campus was impressive in the morning light, with its historic buildings and manicured grounds creating an atmosphere of tradition and excellence. Sarah had researched the history of the institution before David's enrollment, learning about its founding in 1845 and its role in training naval officers for more than a century and a half. The sense of continuity and tradition was evident everywhere she looked, From the memorial plaques honoring fallen graduates to the carefully maintained parade grounds where countless ceremonies had taken place. As families gathered in the designated seating areas, Sarah found herself observing the other parents and relatives who had come to celebrate this achievement with their loved ones. She saw mothers wiping away proud tears, fathers taking countless photographs, and grandparents beaming with obvious joy. The diversity of the families represented the breadth of America itself, with people from every background and region of the country united in their pride for the young men and women who were about to become naval officers. Sarah located her assigned seat in the family section, which provided an excellent view of the ceremony area while being positioned to allow easy movement for photography and other activities. She settled into her chair and reviewed the program that had been provided, noting the schedule of events and the various speakers who would address the graduating class. The ceremony was designed to be both solemn and celebratory, honoring the achievement of the graduates while emphasizing the serious responsibilities they were about to undertake. About 30 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, Sarah spotted David in formation with his classmates. Even from a distance, she could see how much he had grown and matured during his 4 years at the academy. His posture was straight and confident, his uniform was immaculate, and he moved with the precision and bearing of someone who had been thoroughly trained in military customs and traditions. Sarah felt a surge of maternal pride as she watched her son prepare for this momentous occasion. The other parents in Sarah's section were chatting excitedly among themselves, sharing stories about their children's experiences at the academy and discussing their plans for celebrating after the ceremony. Sarah listened politely but contributed little to these conversations, preferring to maintain her privacy while still being friendly and approachable. She had perfected this balance over the years, engaging enough to avoid seeming antisocial while revealing little about her own background or experiences. Mrs. Patricia Williams, who was sitting next to Sarah, struck up a conversation about how nervous she was feeling about her daughter's upcoming assignment to a naval vessel. Patricia explained that she had never been in the military herself and found it difficult to understand the demands and challenges that her daughter would face as a newly commissioned officer. She asked Sarah if she had any military experience that might help her understand what to expect. Sarah smiled warmly and acknowledged that she had served in the Navy many years ago, explaining that the experience had been valuable in helping her understand David's journey through the academy. She kept her response deliberately general, mentioning that military service provided excellent training and opportunities for personal growth without going into any specifics about her own role or achievements. Patricia seemed satisfied with this explanation and continued to share her concerns about her daughter's future career. As the conversation continued, Sarah learned that Patricia's daughter Jennifer was planning to pursue a career in naval intelligence, a field that required additional training after commissioning. Sarah found herself providing reassurance and general information about military life, drawing on her extensive experience while being careful not to reveal the depth of her knowledge or the nature of her own service. She spoke about the importance of physical fitness, mental toughness, and adaptability, qualities that she knew were essential for success in any military occupation. The formal ceremony began with the traditional military pageantry that Sarah remembered from her own commissioning ceremony 25 years earlier. The color guard presented the flags, the national anthem was sung with obvious emotion by the assembled crowd, and various dignitaries took their places on the reviewing platform. The precision and professionalism of the ceremony reflected the standards that the Academy maintained in all its activities, creating an atmosphere of dignity and respect that honored both the graduates and the institution itself. Admiral Robert Mackenzie, the superintendent of the Naval Academy, served as the master of ceremonies and delivered opening remarks that emphasized the significance of the occasion and the responsibilities that the new officers were accepting. His speech was both inspiring and sobering, acknowledging the challenges facing the Navy in an increasingly complex global environment while expressing confidence in the ability of the graduating class to meet those challenges with honor and distinction. The keynote speaker was Secretary of the Navy Margaret Thompson, who had traveled from Washington to address the graduating class. Her speech focused on the evolving role of naval power in maintaining international stability and protecting American interests around the world. She spoke about technological advances that were changing the nature of naval warfare, the importance of building partnerships with allied nations, and the need for officers who could adapt and lead in uncertain environments. Sarah listened to the speeches with the attention of someone who understood the realities behind the rhetoric. She had operated in the complex environments that the speakers described, working with international partners and dealing with technological challenges that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Her own experience had taught her that the most important qualities for a military officer were not the technical skills that could be taught in classrooms, but the judgment, courage, and integrity that enabled effective leadership under pressure. As the ceremony progressed to the actual conferring of degrees and commissions, Sarah felt her attention focus completely on David and his classmates. The moment when each midshipman received their diploma and was administered the oath of office was deeply meaningful, representing the culmination of 4 years of intensive academic, military, and leadership training. Sarah watched with growing emotion as David's row prepared to approach the platform where they would officially become officers in the United States Navy. When David's name was called, Sarah felt her heart swell with pride as she watched her son walk across the stage with confidence and dignity. He looked directly at the reviewing officer as he received his diploma, rendered a crisp salute, and shook hands with the Academy officials who were participating in the ceremony. The moment was captured by the official photographers, but Sarah also took several pictures with her own camera, wanting to preserve her own memories of this significant milestone. After David received his commission, he searched the family section until he spotted Sarah in the crowd. Their eyes met across the distance, and Sarah could see the joy and pride on his face as he realized that she had witnessed this important moment in his life. She waved and smiled, feeling tears of happiness beginning to form in her eyes despite her usual emotional self-control. This was a moment she had anticipated for 4 years, and it exceeded all her expectations. The ceremony continued with the traditional hat toss, where all the newly commissioned officers threw their midshipman covers into the air in celebration of their new status. The symbolism was clear and powerful. They were leaving behind their roles as students and taking on the responsibilities of military officers. The crowd cheered enthusiastically as hundreds of hats sailed through the air, creating a spectacular visual display that marked the official end of the graduation ceremony. As families began to move toward the designated reunion areas where they could meet with their newly commissioned officers, Sarah gathered her belongings and prepared to congratulate David on his achievement. She was excited to see him and give him the gift she had brought, but she was also aware that this would be a busy time with many people competing for his attention. She planned to wait patiently for her opportunity to spend time with him, understanding that he would want to say goodbye to classmates and celebrate with friends before focusing on family activities. The reunion area was organized by company, allowing families to locate their graduates efficiently despite the large number of people involved. Sarah made her way to David's company area, navigating through the crowd of excited relatives and proud new officers. The atmosphere was jubilant, with laughter, tears of joy, and countless photographs being taken to commemorate the occasion. When Sarah finally reached David, he immediately wrapped her in an enthusiastic hug that lifted her slightly off the ground. At 22, he was now taller and stronger than his mother, though she could still see traces of the little boy she had raised in his smile and the way his eyes lit up when he saw her. They stood together for a moment, both overwhelmed by the significance of the occasion and the realization that this marked the beginning of a new chapter in both their lives. The seafood restaurant that David had chosen for their celebration dinner was located in the historic district of Annapolis, housed in a converted colonial building that overlooked the harbor. The establishment had been serving naval families for decades, and the walls were decorated with maritime artifacts and photographs from various eras of naval history. Sarah appreciated the atmosphere, which felt both elegant and authentically connected to the naval tradition that had shaped both her life and David's. David had invited 2 of his closest academy friends to join them for dinner: Marcus Thompson, his roommate from Texas, and Jennifer Williams, whose mother Sarah had met during the graduation ceremony. The three newly commissioned officers were still wearing their dress uniforms, having decided to extend the formality of the day through their celebration dinner. They looked sharp and professional, embodying the confidence and bearing that 4 years of intensive military training had instilled in them. As they were seated at a table near the window overlooking the harbor, Sarah noticed that other diners were clearly recognizing the significance of the uniforms and the occasion. Several older patrons, who appeared to be military veterans themselves, nodded respectfully toward their table. A waitress mentioned that many academy graduates chose this restaurant for their celebration dinners, making it something of a tradition for families marking this important milestone. The conversation during dinner was lively and wide-ranging, covering topics from the morning's ceremony to the young officers' upcoming assignments and long-term career goals. Marcus had received orders to report to a destroyer based in Norfolk, Virginia, while Jennifer would be attending additional training in cryptology before her first operational assignment. David had been selected for submarine service and would be heading to New London, Connecticut, for 6 months of intensive submarine warfare training. Sarah listened with interest as the three friends discussed their different career paths and the challenges they anticipated facing in their first assignments. Their conversation revealed the depth of their preparation and the seriousness with which they approached their new responsibilities. Despite their youth, they demonstrated a mature understanding of the commitment they had made and the expectations that would be placed upon them as naval officers. When the conversation turned to family backgrounds and the influences that had shaped their decisions to attend the Naval Academy, Sarah found herself in the familiar position of deflecting attention from her own military experience. David mentioned that his mother had served in the Navy and had been supportive of his decision to pursue a military career, but he kept his description general, focusing more on her encouragement than on any specific details of her service. Jennifer, whose mother Patricia had expressed concerns about her daughter's upcoming challenges, asked Sarah directly about her military experience and whether she had any advice for someone beginning their naval career. Sarah smiled warmly and provided some general guidance about the importance of staying physically fit, maintaining a positive attitude, and being willing to learn from experienced personnel. She emphasized that the Navy would provide excellent training and that the key to success was approaching each assignment with professionalism and dedication. Marcus, whose father had served in the Army, was curious about the differences between various military services and asked Sarah about her perspective on naval operations compared to land-based military activities. Sarah found herself drawing on her extensive knowledge of joint operations and inter-service cooperation, though she framed her responses in terms that suggested general awareness rather than detailed operational experience. She spoke about the unique challenges of operating at sea and the importance of teamwork in the confined environment of naval vessels. As dinner progressed, the conversation became more personal, with each of the young officers sharing stories about memorable experiences from their academy years. David recounted some of the more challenging academic courses he had completed, while Marcus described his experience on the academy sailing team, and Jennifer talked about her participation in the debate society. Their stories revealed the well-rounded education they had received, which combined rigorous academic study with military training and extracurricular activities designed to develop leadership skills. Sarah enjoyed hearing these stories, many of which were new to her despite her regular communication with David throughout his academy years. She realized that there were aspects of his experience that he had not shared with her, probably because he had wanted to handle challenges independently rather than worrying his mother with every difficulty he encountered. This independence impressed her and confirmed that she had succeeded in raising a son who was self-reliant and capable of handling adversity without constant parental intervention. The restaurant began to fill with other academy families celebrating their own graduations, creating an atmosphere of shared joy and accomplishment. Sarah observed the interactions between other parents and their newly commissioned children, noting the range of emotions and family dynamics that were evident in these reunions. Some families were clearly military connected, with parents who understood the significance of the occasion from their own experience, while others appeared to be navigating unfamiliar territory as their children embarked on military careers. During a brief lull in the conversation, David excused himself to speak with another classmate who had arrived with his family at a nearby table. This gave Sarah an opportunity to observe Marcus and Jennifer more closely and to appreciate the friendship that had developed among the three young officers. It was clear that they had supported each other through the challenges of academy life and had developed the kind of mutual respect and camaraderie that would serve them well throughout their naval careers. Jennifer took advantage of David's absence to ask Sarah more specific questions about military life and the adjustments required when transitioning from training to operational assignments. Sarah could see that Jennifer was genuinely concerned about meeting the expectations of her future commanding officers and wanted practical advice from someone with real military experience. Sarah provided reassurance while being careful to keep her responses general enough to avoid revealing the extent of her own operational background. When the conversation turned to physical fitness standards and the importance of maintaining readiness for the demands of military service, Sarah found herself on more familiar ground. She spoke enthusiastically about the benefits of regular exercise and proper nutrition, drawing on her own experience of maintaining peak physical condition throughout her military career and into her civilian life. Marcus and Jennifer were clearly impressed by Sarah's obvious fitness level and her knowledgeable discussion of training principles and injury prevention. As David returned to the table, he caught the end of Sarah's comments about physical conditioning and smiled with obvious pride at his mother's expertise. He mentioned to his friends that Sarah had always been an excellent role model for maintaining health and fitness, even mentioning that she still followed a rigorous daily workout routine that would challenge people half her age. This comment sparked additional questions about Sarah's current activities and how she had maintained such impressive physical condition. Sarah deflected most of these questions by redirecting the conversation toward the importance of finding physical activities that were enjoyable and sustainable over the long term. She spoke about her love of swimming and hiking, activities that kept her connected to the natural environment while providing excellent cardiovascular and strength benefits. She did not mention that her swimming routine included open water distances and conditions that would be challenging for most recreational swimmers, or that her hiking often involved terrain and navigation challenges that drew directly on her military training. As the evening progressed and the initial excitement of the day began to give way to more relaxed conversation, Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying the company of David's friends and the insights they provided into his academy experience. She could see that he had chosen his friends wisely, selecting people who shared his values and commitment to excellence. The mutual respect and affection among the three young officers was evident in their interactions, and Sarah felt confident that these relationships would continue to be important as they advanced in their careers. The dinner conversation eventually turned to families and backgrounds, with Marcus and Jennifer sharing stories about their hometowns and the experiences that had influenced their decisions to pursue military careers. Marcus spoke about growing up in a military family and the impact his father's service had made on his understanding of duty and patriotism. Jennifer described her involvement in ROTC during high school and her fascination with technology and intelligence analysis that had led her to choose her specialty field. When the conversation naturally turned to Sarah's background, David provided a brief overview of her career as a high school mathematics teacher and her single-parent dedication to supporting his education and activities. He spoke with obvious affection about her involvement in his academic and athletic pursuits throughout his childhood and adolescence, crediting her support and encouragement with helping him achieve the goals that had led to his acceptance at the Naval Academy. Sarah appreciated David's thoughtful presentation of her civilian life, which emphasized her role as a supportive parent without delving into details about her military background that might prompt additional questions. She added some information about her teaching career and her enjoyment of working with high school students, explaining that education had provided her with a satisfying second career that allowed her to make a positive impact on young people's lives. The following morning brought an unexpected change to Sarah's carefully planned weekend schedule. David had mentioned during dinner that the Academy was hosting a special reception for graduates and their families, featuring displays of naval equipment and demonstrations by various military units. Sarah had initially planned to skip this event and spend her remaining time in Annapolis having a quiet brunch with David before heading to the airport for her afternoon flight back to California. However, David was particularly excited about attending the reception because it would include demonstrations by several elite military units, including Navy SEALs from the East Coast teams. He explained that few civilians ever had the opportunity to see SEAL equipment and tactics demonstrated in a controlled environment, and he hoped that attending the event might give him insights into potential career paths that could be available to him later in his naval service. Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions when David mentioned the SEAL demonstration. On one hand, she was curious to see how the units were presenting themselves to the public and what aspects of their capabilities they were willing to display in an unclassified setting. On the other hand, she was concerned about the possibility of encountering former colleagues or being recognized by someone who might remember her from her operational years. The SEAL community was relatively small, and despite her retirement 15 years earlier, there was always a chance that someone might recognize her. After some internal debate, Sarah decided to attend the reception with David, reasoning that her presence would mean a great deal to him, and that the likelihood of recognition was relatively low given the passage of time and her dramatically different appearance from her operational days. She had gained some weight since retirement. Her hair was now a different style and color, and her overall presentation was so thoroughly civilian that most people would never associate her with the lean, hard-edged operator she had once been. The reception was being held on the academy grounds in a large open area that had been set up with various displays and demonstration zones. Military vehicles, aircraft, and equipment were positioned throughout the space, with personnel available to answer questions and explain the capabilities of different systems. The atmosphere was festive and educational, designed to give families a better understanding of the military capabilities that their newly commissioned officers might encounter during their careers. Sarah and David arrived at the reception area in the mid-morning, joining several hundred other families who were taking advantage of this unique opportunity to learn about naval operations and equipment. The displays were impressive and well-organized, featuring everything from ship navigation systems to underwater demolition equipment. Each station was staffed by knowledgeable personnel who were clearly enjoying the opportunity to share their expertise with interested civilians. As they walked through the various exhibits, Sarah found herself automatically analyzing the equipment and techniques being demonstrated, drawing on her extensive operational knowledge to evaluate the accuracy and completeness of the presentations. She was impressed by the professionalism of the demonstrators and the way they managed to convey meaningful information while maintaining appropriate security protocols regarding classified capabilities and techniques. David was particularly fascinated by the aviation displays, which featured aircraft that he might encounter during his submarine service, as well as helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft used in various naval operations. Sarah watched with amusement as her son peppered the aviation personnel with detailed technical questions that revealed both his academy training and his genuine curiosity about military systems and tactics. His enthusiasm reminded her of her own early fascination with military capabilities and the excitement she had felt when first learning about specialized operations. The crowd at the reception was diverse, including not only academy families, but also local civilians who had been invited to attend as part of the Navy's community outreach efforts. Sarah noticed several people who were clearly military veterans, identifiable by their bearing, haircuts, and the way they asked questions that revealed familiarity with military operations. She also observed a number of active duty personnel who were attending in their dress uniforms, adding to the formal atmosphere of the event. As they made their way through the various displays, Sarah and David eventually approached the area where the Navy SEAL demonstration was scheduled to take place. A small crowd had already gathered around the designated space, which featured examples of SEAL equipment including diving gear, weapons systems, and communication devices. The setup was professional and informative without revealing any sensitive operational details or classified capabilities. The SEAL demonstration team consisted of 4 operators who represented a good cross-section of the community's diversity and experience levels. The team leader was a senior chief petty officer with obvious combat experience, while the other three members included both junior and mid-level personnel who clearly took pride in their opportunity to represent their community to the public. All four wore standard Navy working uniforms rather than specialized operational gear, maintaining the appropriate level of security while still looking professional and competent. Sarah positioned herself toward the back of the crowd that had gathered for the demonstration, hoping to observe without drawing attention to herself. She noticed that David had moved closer to the front, eager to get the best possible view of the equipment and hear the explanations being provided by the SEAL personnel. His enthusiasm was evident to everyone around him, and several other families commented on his obvious interest in learning about this aspect of naval operations. The demonstration began with a brief introduction to naval special warfare and the role that SEALs play in supporting naval operations around the world. The senior chief provided an overview that was both informative and appropriately general, explaining the selection and training process without revealing specific details about operational methods or classified capabilities. Sarah was impressed by his presentation skills and his ability to convey the professionalism and dedication of the SEAL community without compromising security protocols. As the demonstration progressed to include displays of various equipment and explanations of training techniques, Sarah found herself unconsciously evaluating the accuracy and completeness of the information being provided. Her operational experience allowed her to recognize what was being omitted for security reasons and to appreciate the skill with which the demonstrators were walking the line between education and operational security. The presentation was clearly well-rehearsed and professionally executed. During the equipment display portion of the demonstration, one of the younger SEALs noticed David's obvious interest and engaged him in a conversation about naval career opportunities and the possibility of applying for SEAL training later in his career. The SEAL explained the basic requirements for SEAL candidates and emphasized the importance of physical fitness, mental toughness, and teamwork in successfully completing the training pipeline. David asked several intelligent questions that revealed his academy education and his serious consideration of various career options. Sarah watched this interaction with mixed emotions, remembering her own introduction to naval special warfare and the excitement she had felt when first learning about the opportunities available in the SEAL community. She was proud of David's interest and his thoughtful questions, but she was also aware of the challenges and sacrifices that came with a career in special operations. The decision to pursue such a path was not one to be taken lightly, and she hoped that David would carefully consider all aspects of such a commitment before making any decisions. As the formal demonstration concluded and the crowd began to disperse, several people remained to ask additional questions or examine the equipment more closely. David was among those who stayed, continuing his conversation with the SEAL personnel and asking for additional information about training requirements and career progression opportunities. Sarah remained in the background, content to observe while David pursued his interests without maternal interference. The interaction between David and the SEALs was going well, with the moment that Sarah had spent 15 years avoiding was now unfolding in front of dozens of witnesses, including her son, who was approaching with an expression of complete bewilderment. Senior Chief Rodriguez's enthusiastic recognition had created a small crowd of curious onlookers, all wondering why a decorated Navy SEAL was treating this quiet, reserved mother with such obvious respect and admiration. Sarah realized that any attempt to deflect or minimize the situation would only make things worse, and that the truth she had so carefully guarded was about to be revealed. David reached the small circle that had formed around Sarah and Rodriguez just as the senior chief was explaining to the gathered families that they were in the presence of a true naval hero. "This lady right here," Rodriguez said with unmistakable pride, "is Sarah Martinez, one of the finest operators who ever earned a trident. She served with distinction in naval special warfare back when very few women were even allowed to try. I had the honor of supporting some of her missions, and I can tell you that she set the standard for professionalism and courage." The impact of Rodriguez's words was immediate and dramatic. David's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, surprise, disbelief, and, finally, a dawning understanding that began to explain many things about his mother that had never quite made sense to him. The other families in the group turned to stare at Sarah with new recognition, suddenly, seeing her reserved demeanor and obvious physical fitness in a completely different light. Sarah herself felt a mix of resignation and relief, knowing that her secret was finally out but uncertain about how to handle the consequences. "Mom," David said quietly, his voice carrying a note of awe that Sarah had never heard before. "You were a Navy SEAL?" The question hung in the air as everyone waited for her response, creating a moment of silence that seemed to stretch far longer than it actually lasted. Sarah looked at her son's face and saw not disappointment or anger at having been kept in the dark, but rather amazement and pride that were gradually replacing his initial shock. Sarah nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth that she could no longer deny or deflect. "I was," she said simply, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had served her well throughout her operational career. "I served for 20 years, retiring when you were 6 years old. I wanted to be available for you during your childhood and adolescence, so I transitioned to civilian life and became a teacher." Her explanation was straightforward and honest, delivered without apology or extensive justification. The revelation created a ripple effect throughout the gathered crowd, with people whispering among themselves as they processed this unexpected information. Several of the Academy families began to look at Sarah with new respect, suddenly, understanding that the quiet mother they had met at the graduation ceremony was actually someone with extraordinary military credentials and operational experience. The contrast between her modest presentation and her remarkable background was striking and impressive. Rodriguez, realizing that he had inadvertently revealed something that Sarah had apparently kept private, looked somewhat sheepish but remained enthusiastic about the opportunity to honor her service. "Ma'am, I hope I didn't speak out of turn," he said respectfully. "But your reputation in the teams is legendary, and I think people should know about the sacrifices and achievements of operators like you. You paved the way for other women in special operations, and your service record speaks for itself." David moved closer to his mother, his mind clearly racing as he began to reprocess everything he thought he knew about her background and experiences. "That's why you always seem to know so much about military life," he said with growing understanding. "That's why you were never worried about my academy training or concerned about whether I could handle the physical and mental challenges. You had been through much more demanding experiences yourself." Sarah smiled at her son's perceptiveness, feeling a sense of relief that her secret was finally out in the open. "I wanted you to succeed on your own merits," she explained. "I didn't want my background to create pressure or expectations that might have been unfair to you. Your achievement at the academy is yours alone, earned through your own hard work and dedication. I'm proud of you for what you've accomplished, not because of anything I might have done during my career." The crowd around them had grown larger as word of Sarah's background spread through the reception area, with more families and military personnel gathering to hear about the woman who had served as a Navy SEAL when such service was extremely rare for women. Sarah found herself the center of attention in exactly the way she had spent 15 years avoiding, but she handled the situation with the same calm professionalism that had served her well during her operational career. One of the other Academy mothers, who had been struggling with concerns about her daughter's upcoming military service, approached Sarah with obvious respect and curiosity. "Mrs. Martinez," she said hesitantly, "would you mind if I asked you about your experience as a woman in such a demanding military role? My daughter Jennifer is about to begin her naval career, and I've been worried about whether she'll be able to handle the challenges she'll face." Sarah turned her full attention to the concerned mother, understanding the anxiety that drove the question. "Military service is demanding for everyone," she replied thoughtfully, regardless of gender. "Success depends on preparation, determination, and the willingness to work as part of a team. Your daughter has already proven herself by graduating from the Naval Academy, which means she has the foundation she needs to succeed in whatever role she chooses. The key is maintaining confidence in her abilities while remaining open to learning from experienced personnel." The conversation that followed was unlike anything Sarah had experienced during her 15 years of civilian life. For the first time since her retirement, she found herself discussing her military career openly, sharing insights and experiences that she had kept private for so long. The questions came from academy families, active duty personnel, and curious civilians who were fascinated by the opportunity to speak with someone who had served in such an elite and secretive capacity. David remained close to his mother throughout these conversations, clearly proud, but also still processing the magnitude of what he had learned about her background. During a brief lull in the questions, he pulled her aside for a private moment. "Why didn't you ever tell me about this?" he asked, his tone more curious than accusatory. "I mean, I'm incredibly proud of what you accomplished, but I'm also confused about why you kept it secret for so long." Sarah took a moment to consider her response, wanting to help David understand the reasoning behind her decision without making it seem like she had been ashamed of her service or distrustful of him. "When your father died," she explained, "I realized that you needed at least one parent who could be consistently present and available throughout your childhood. Special operations is an incredibly demanding career that requires frequent deployments and training exercises that can last for months. I made the choice to prioritize being your mother over continuing my military career." David nodded slowly as he processed this explanation, beginning to understand the sacrifice that his mother had made for his benefit. "But even after I grew up and left for the academy," he said, "you could have told me about your background. Didn't you think I would be proud of what you had accomplished?" Sarah smiled at his question, touched by his obvious pride in her achievements. "I was concerned that knowledge of my background might create pressure for you to live up to expectations that weren't fair," she replied. "I wanted you to pursue your own goals and interests without feeling like you had to measure yourself against my experiences. Your success at the academy and your commissioning as a naval officer are your own achievements, earned through your own efforts and abilities." The conversation between mother and son was interrupted when Senior Chief Rodriguez approached with the other members of his demonstration team, all of whom wanted to meet the legendary operator they had heard about, but never expected to encounter at a family event. The younger SEALs were clearly impressed and somewhat awed to be in the presence of someone who had earned such respect within their community, particularly given the barriers she had overcome during her career. "Ma'am," said Petty Officer First Class James Anderson, the youngest member of the demonstration team, "would you mind if we took a photograph? It would be an honor to have a picture with you to share with our teammates back at the command. Stories about your operations have been part of our informal history lessons, and meeting you is like meeting a legend." Sarah agreed to the photograph, understanding the importance of tradition and mentorship within the SEAL community. As the group gathered for the picture, she found herself feeling a sense of connection to her former career that she had not experienced in many years. The pride and professionalism of the young operators reminded her of why she had loved her service so much and why the decision to retire had been so difficult despite its necessity. The photograph session attracted additional attention from other reception attendees, including several senior academy officials who had become aware of Sarah's presence and wanted to meet her personally. The situation was becoming increasingly public, with word of her background spreading throughout the event and drawing interest from military personnel and civilian families alike. As the afternoon progressed, Sarah found herself participating in impromptu conversations about military service, leadership, and the challenges facing women in combat roles. Her responses were thoughtful and measured, reflecting both her operational experience and her years as an educator. She spoke about the importance of physical and mental preparation, the value of teamwork and mutual support, and the need for military personnel to adapt to changing environments and evolving threats. David remained close to his mother throughout these interactions, clearly fascinated by this new perspective on someone he thought he had known completely. He asked her several questions about her training and operational experience, though Sarah kept her responses general enough to avoid revealing classified information or sensitive operational details. She was able to share insights about military culture, leadership principles, and the personal qualities that contributed to success in demanding environments. As the reception began to wind down and families started to leave for their various post-graduation activities, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her weekend had changed from her original plans. Instead of maintaining her carefully guarded privacy and returning to California with her secret intact, she was now facing a future in which her military background was known to David and potentially to other people in their lives. The drive back to David's hotel gave them an opportunity for a more private conversation about the revelations of the day and their implications for their relationship going forward. David was full of questions about his mother's career and the experiences that had shaped her, while Sarah was working through her own feelings about having her secret revealed in such a public way. "I understand why you kept this private for so long," David said as they sat in the hotel parking lot, neither quite ready to end this extraordinary day. "But I'm glad I finally know the truth about your service. It explains so many things about you that I never fully understood, and it makes me even more proud to be your son." Sarah felt tears beginning to form in her eyes as she heard the emotion in David's voice and realized that her fears about negative consequences from revealing her background had been unfounded. Her son was proud of her service and grateful for the sacrifices she had made for his benefit, rather than feeling deceived or disappointed by her long-maintained secrecy. "Thank you for understanding," Sarah replied, reaching over to squeeze David's hand. "Your success and happiness have always been my top priority, and I'm proud of the young man you've become and the officer you're going to be. Your father would have been incredibly proud of both of us today." As they prepared to say goodbye before Sarah's flight back to California, both mother and son understood that their relationship had fundamentally changed during this weekend. The revelation of Sarah's SEAL background had added a new dimension to their connection while strengthening the foundation of love and mutual respect that had always defined their bond. David would begin his naval career with a new understanding of his family's military heritage, while Sarah would return to her civilian life with the knowledge that her secret was finally in the open and that the consequences had been far more positive than she had ever dared to hope. Operators clearly impressed by his knowledge and serious approach to learning about their community. However, the situation changed dramatically when the senior chief noticed Sarah standing at the edge of the group and did a double-take that indicated recognition. His expression shifted from casual professionalism to surprise, and then to something approaching excitement as he realized who he was looking at. Senior Chief Mike Rodriguez had been a junior petty officer 15 years earlier when Sarah was still on active duty, and he had served on one of the teams that had provided support for several of her missions. Despite the passage of time and her civilian appearance, he recognized her immediately, remembering both her reputation and her distinctive features. The SEAL community was small enough that exceptional operators were well remembered, especially those who had broken barriers or achieved unusual distinctions. Rodriguez excused himself from the conversation with David and approached Sarah with a broad smile and obvious respect. His movement caught the attention of the other SEALs and several families who were still in the area, creating a small scene that was exactly what Sarah had hoped to avoid. She realized immediately that her cover was about to be blown and that her carefully maintained privacy was about to become a thing of the past. "Sarah Martinez," Rodriguez said with unmistakable recognition and respect. "I can't believe it's really you. What are you doing here?" His tone was friendly and admiring, but loud enough to be heard by everyone in the immediate vicinity. Sarah saw David's head turn toward the conversation, his expression showing confusion about why a Navy SEAL would know his mother personally and be approaching her with such obvious respect and familiarity. Sarah smiled politely and acknowledged Rodriguez's greeting while hoping to keep the interaction brief and low-key. However, she realized that damage had already been done when she saw the expressions of curiosity on the faces of the people around them, including David, who was now watching the exchange with obvious bewilderment. The carefully constructed barrier between her operational past and her civilian present was about to crumble in the most public way possible. "I'm here for my son's graduation," Sarah replied quietly, hoping to end the conversation quickly and avoid drawing additional attention to herself. However, Rodriguez was clearly too excited by the encounter to pick up on her subtle signals for discretion. His enthusiasm was understandable given her reputation in the SEAL community, but it was exactly the kind of recognition that Sarah had spent 15 years avoiding. "Your son graduated from the academy?" Rodriguez asked with obvious admiration. "That's fantastic. He must have gotten his drive and dedication from his mother. I remember hearing about some of your missions back in the day, legendary stuff." his comments were drawing even more attention from the people around them. And Sarah could see that David was moving closer to hear what the SEAL was saying about his mother. The situation was rapidly spiraling beyond Sarah's control, and she realized that her long-maintained secret was about to be revealed in the most dramatic way possible. She could see David approaching with a confused and curious expression, and she knew that within moments she would have to explain why a Navy SEAL was treating her with the kind of respect and recognition that was reserved for fellow operators and distinguished veterans. As the meal drew to a close and the restaurant began to empty as other families concluded their own celebrations, Sarah reflected on how much this day had meant to both her and David. The graduation ceremony had been everything she had hoped it would be, and the dinner conversation had given her valuable insights into David's friendships and his preparation for the challenges ahead. She felt proud of the young man he had become and confident that he was ready for the responsibilities of naval service. The three friends made plans to stay in touch as they reported to their various assignments, promising to maintain the connections that had been forged during their academy years. Sarah was pleased to see that David understood the value of these relationships and was committed to nurturing them despite the geographical separation that their different assignments would create. The military community was often surprisingly small, and she knew from her own experience that academy classmates often found themselves serving together again at various points throughout their careers. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Sarah presented David with the gift she had brought for him, a high-quality watch engraved with his graduation date, and a simple message of love and pride. The watch was practical as well as meaningful, designed to meet military specifications for durability and accuracy while serving as a permanent reminder of this important milestone in his life. David was clearly moved by the gesture and immediately put the watch on, expressing his appreciation for both the gift and the thoughtfulness behind it. The evening concluded with the group taking photographs outside the restaurant, with the harbor and historic Annapolis waterfront providing a beautiful backdrop for commemorating the occasion. Sarah took several pictures of David with his friends, knowing that these images would become treasured memories of their graduation day and the beginning of their naval careers. She also posed for photos with the group, though she was careful to position herself in ways that would not reveal her tattoo even if her sleeve shifted during the photography. As they walked back toward the parking area where they had left their cars, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. The day had been perfect in every way that mattered, and she had successfully shared in David's triumph without drawing attention to her own military background or achievements. Tomorrow, she would return to her quiet life in San Diego, but tonight she was simply a proud mother celebrating her son's graduation from one of the most prestigious military institutions in the world. David introduced Sarah to several of his classmates and their families, proudly explaining that she was a retired Navy veteran who had inspired his decision to pursue a military career. Sarah smiled and exchanged pleasantries with the other families, but she noticed that most people seemed to assume she had served in a support role rather than a combat position. This assumption was reinforced by her reserved demeanor and the conservative appearance she had carefully cultivated over the years. Among the people David introduced was his roommate Marcus Thompson and Marcus's family, who had traveled from Texas for the graduation ceremony. Marcus was an impressive young man who had excelled in both academics and athletics during his time at the academy, and his parents were obviously proud of his achievement. During their conversation, Marcus's father mentioned that he had served in the Army during the Gulf War and expressed his respect for anyone who had chosen to make military service a career. Sarah found herself drawn into a conversation about the differences between Army and Navy service, sharing general observations about military culture while being careful not to reveal specific details about her own experience. Marcus's father was knowledgeable about military history and asked several pointed questions about naval operations, but Sarah deflected most of these inquiries with polite responses that acknowledged his interest without providing the detailed answers that might reveal her specialized background. As the afternoon progressed, the families began to disperse for various celebratory activities. Many were planning elaborate dinner parties at local restaurants, while others were organizing more casual gatherings at hotels or private homes. David had made reservations at a well-regarded seafood restaurant in downtown Annapolis, planning a quiet celebration with just Sarah and two of his closest friends from the academy. Before leaving the academy campus, Sarah and David took a walking tour of some of the historic sites that held special meaning for his experience as a midshipman. They visited the chapel where David had attended services throughout his 4 years, the library where he had spent countless hours studying, and the athletic facilities where he had maintained his physical conditioning. Each location held memories that David eagerly shared with his mother, giving her insights into his daily life that had been impossible to convey through their regular phone conversations and occasional visits. As they walked through the campus, Sarah found herself reflecting on the parallels between David's experience and her own military training, though the settings and specific challenges had been quite different. She recognized the sense of pride and accomplishment that came from successfully completing a demanding program, the bonds that formed with fellow service members who had shared similar challenges, and the confidence that came from knowing you had been thoroughly prepared for the responsibilities you were about to assume. As she approached Annapolis, Sarah could see other families heading toward the Naval Academy campus. Cars with license plates from dozens of different states filled the roads leading to the academy, carrying parents, siblings, and extended family members who had traveled from across the country to witness this important milestone. The sense of shared purpose and pride was evident in the faces of the people she saw at traffic lights and in parking areas. Sarah checked into her hotel room at a modest establishment about 10 minutes from the academy campus. She had chosen the location for its convenience rather than luxury, planning to spend as little time as possible in the room. After unpacking her few belongings, she changed into comfortable clothes and decided to take a walk around the historic downtown area of Annapolis. The city was charming, with its colonial architecture and maritime atmosphere. Sarah found herself drawn to the harbor area, where she could see sailing vessels and feel the familiar pull of being near the water. The ocean had been such a central part of her military career that she still felt most at peace when she could see and hear waves lapping against docks or shores. As evening approached, Sarah returned to her hotel room and began preparing for the next day's ceremony. She laid out her black dress carefully, making sure it was wrinkle-free and appropriate for the formal occasion. She reviewed the graduation schedule that David had sent her, noting the timing of various events and the location where families were supposed to gather. That night, as she lay in the unfamiliar hotel bed, Sarah allowed herself to think about the path that had brought her to this moment. She had made countless sacrifices to ensure that David could pursue his dreams without being overshadowed by her own military achievements. Tomorrow, he would receive his commission as an ensign in the United States Navy, beginning his own journey of service to the country that had given both of them so many opportunities. Sarah fell asleep thinking about the young woman she had been when she first enlisted in the Navy 25 years ago, full of determination and eager to prove herself in a male-dominated field. She had exceeded every expectation and broken barriers that few people even knew existed. Now, her son was about to begin his own military career, and she couldn't have been more proud of the young man he had become.